Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Foreman. As always, this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in here at GSMC. I'm here, as always, on Mondays and Thursdays. So again, thanks for tuning in. A whole lot to discuss today. We still have the NBA, the NFL, the MLB no longer have the NHL. So, the sports seasons are somewhat dropping like flies, if you will. So again, take advantage of all of our different sports leagues going on right now, all of our different sports going on right now, while we have most of them. Again, we don't have all of them anymore. So while we have the ones we do, take advantage of it, hold them close. A whole lot to discuss in the world of basketball this week, today. The NBA Finals, Game 3, props to the Miami Heat for coming out and winning Game 3, a surprising effort for sure, a potential swing in momentum for the series for Miami We'll see if they can capitalize on that, going forward in Game 4 and going forward in the series, but either way, an impressive performance in Game 3, so I feel like I need to start the episode today by discussing the impressive performance from Jimmy Butler and from the Miami Heat. Okay, they win Game 3. I want to start today by discussing that. Afterwards, I want to discuss this year's season, this year's NBA Finals. With everything that's going on, how different everything is right now. I want to discuss, if this year's finals, do they count? Is this a 100% legitimate championship this year? I want to discuss that. Going after that, I want to move segments, move topics, and talk about the Los Angeles Clippers, their situation right now after a disappointing end in the postseason. I want to talk about them going forward, their situation. What do they do now, for the Los Angeles Clippers? And then at the very end of the podcast, I want to discuss Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving in specific. They are again in the news, but not necessarily for their performance on the court. It is for a big statement they made off of the court, regarding their coaching staff. So talk about Kevin Durant, Kyrie, some comments they made regarding their coaching staff. So a packed show for you guys today, a whole lot to break down and discuss. So I want to go ahead and dive into it and start today's episode. So like I said, the NBA Finals, we're about halfway through the finals now, almost halfway through them now after Game 3. The first games, of the first two games, I should say, of the series, we're not really close necessarily. Game 1, Lakers win 116-98, so it's an 18-point win for the Lakers in Game 1. Game 2 comes around, the Lakers win 124-114, so a 10-point deficit for the Heat in Game 2. So games 1 and 2 pretty similar, not too close in a sense. Both Anthony Davis and LeBron, both of them, it's pretty similar in both the two games. They both have very good games. LeBron or AD in Game 1, 34, 9, and 5 for AD is dominant on both the offensive and defensive side. Again, 34, 9, and 5, one of the more impressive finals debuts we've seen. And as far as his back-to-back performances, dropping 34, then 32 in following games, he's up there with Shaq and Kareem with some of the highest scoring, back-to-back finals games in history. So AD in the first two showings had very good performances, if not great performances. Again, game 1, 34-9-5, game 2, 32-14. As far as LeBron goes in Game 1, LeBron, pretty similar to AD, has a pretty dominant and a pretty great showing by their standards. Honestly, he could have, obviously the stat line could have been a little bit better as far as points and such, but AD got it done. LeBron himself, 25 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, nearly the NBA Finals triple-double yet again for LeBron James. But he goes for 25, 13, and 9. Him and AD are the first Laker duo to score 25 plus since Shaq and Kobe in the finals. So anytime you're getting compared with those two guys, Shaq and Kobe, LeBron and AD, that you're doing something right. Those two guys are a true testament to those two guys and what they're doing in the first, in the beginning of this series so far. In Game 2, I'm sorry, I don't want to forget Jimmy Butler's performance in Game 1. Because if you remember, he was honestly the shining star, the only good thing to look at, honestly, in Game 1. He drops 23 points, and that is really all to talk about. Bam gets hurt, Goran gets hurt. Tyler Hero, the rookie, does not play well in his finals debut. Duncan Robinson in his finals debut does not play well. So a lot of guys in their first finals kind of showing it's their first finals, not necessarily playing that well. But again, Jimmy Butler plays well. That's about it. In Game 2, again, AD plays very well, 32-14. LeBron kind of has his best performance yet in the finals. This year, 33-9-9 for LeBron. Jimmy Butler plays very well for the Miami Heat. Again, he's kind of pretty much, at least, the only thing to talk about once again for the Miami Heat. They make it a pretty close game, only losing by 10 points, despite losing two very big pieces in Game 1 in Dragic and Bam Adebayo. But Jimmy Butler plays a very good game once again in Game 2, even though he kind of sprains his ankle again in Game 1. So despite having that slight ankle injury, he plays well in Game 2, 25 points, 13 assists for Jimmy Butler. Tyler Hero plays quite a bit better in Game 2 in comparison to Game 1, 17 points and 7 rebounds for Hero in Game 2. But honestly, the story, again, is the duo in LA. LeBron and AD have dominant performances, and the Lakers win. Ultimately, that was the case for Games 1 and 2. Then Game 3 rolls around. Okay, Game 3 rolls around, and the Miami Heat stun the Lakers, come out hot. The Lakers, as I've been kind of waiting for, to be honest with you, I've been kind of waiting for this. The Lakers, a very streaky shooting team. A very hot and cold team as far as their shooting goes. So they've been very hot as of recently. I've been waiting for the cold streak, and I think now we're kind of getting into that. Game 3, we see Danny Green, Caldwell Pope kind of getting into somewhat of a slump. Anthony Davis. So Game 3 rolls around. Miami remains consistent as then the Lakers go though. They finally hit that cold streak, hit the slump that I've kind of been waiting for them to hit. But again, Miami is consistent and plays very well in Game 3. They win 115-104. Jimmy Butler has arguably the best performance of his NBA career. I think it's pretty safe to say he has the best game of his career. Jimmy Butler goes for 40 points, 13 assists, 11 rebounds. So the 40-point triple-double for Jimmy in the finals. He plays very well, wills them to the victory ultimately. But Tyler Hero, he backs up a 17-point performance with another 17-point performance. Plays a little bit better, a little more composed. Kelly Olynyk helps with 17 points. Jay Crowder, 12 points. Duncan Robinson gets a little bit of the butterflies out in his first couple of games. He gets 13 points in Game 3. So a more consistent showing for the Heat. Showing, again, they are meant to be here. They are consistent in a legit team. Night in and night out, they're going to be consistent and play tough basketball, play tough defense, and play all 48 minutes. That's exactly what they did in Game 3, and they were able to knock down some shots, which, again, Los Angeles They were not able to match Miami's offense, which has honestly been the tail, but kind of flipped around so far. LeBron and AD have had the offense on their side. Miami, without Goran and Bam, have not been able to match it in Game 3. The narrative switches. The Lakers cannot match the offense of Miami, especially because of the performance of Anthony Davis. He is in foul trouble throughout the entire game. Only 15 points when it's all said and done for Anthony Davis in Game 3. 15 points, 3 assists, and only 5 rebounds for the 6'11", 6'10" Anthony Davis playing against the undersized Miami Heat. So 15 points and 5 rebounds in an NBA Finals game is not going to get it done. But again, after the dominant performances in games 1 and 2, again 34, 9 and 5, and 32 and 14, you got to expect him to somewhat come back down to earth at some point. At least, showing, if you've been watching him, I should say, throughout this year and throughout his career, after some dominant performances, usually he's going to back it up with a somewhat shaky performance. But a good thing about him is after that shaky performance, he's usually even better than what he usually is, the next game following that. So you can usually book a solid game. You can pretty much book a solid game for Anthony Davis in Game 4. But either way, he can be inconsistent in that third game. That's kind of a testament to who he is. He has a couple of good games, but in that third game, he struggles. So a testament to who he is and who he has been in his career. So don't be surprised after a bad showing, after multiple dominant showings. But again, he doesn't play well. LeBron, on the other hand, almost wills the Lakers, to a 3-0 lead over the Miami Heat. He drops 25 points, 8 assists, 10 rebounds. He plays a very good overall game. Almost gets them there, but couldn't get it done in crunch time himself. Again, with AD being in foul trouble, it was mainly him. He could not get it done. Kuzma contributes very, very well, very, very highly. 19 points for Kyle Kuzma off the bench, 19 points for Marcus Morris. So they're getting a whole lot of people contributing off of their bench as far as Morris and Kuzma go. 19 points apiece for those two guards. But ultimately Anthony Davis does not play well, and that is the story of the game. Again, in the first 2 games, Anthony Davis and LeBron both play well, and they win. Game 3 comes around. Anthony Davis struggles. Anthony Davis has a bad game. He's in foul trouble for the entire game, and the Lakers end up losing. The Lakers trailed the entire game, okay? And again, I think ultimately it's because of the performance from Anthony Davis and the foul trouble he was in. Jimmy Butler played his best game, like I said, possibly his best game ever, you could argue. 40-point triple-double in the NBA Finals when the stage is at it, when the lights are at their brightest on the biggest stage possible. When you have teammates down, your back's against the wall, and preparing to go down 0-3. It's a must-win game. He comes out with the 40-point triple-double, puts the Heat on his back. Best game in his career. Props to Jimmy Butler for doing that. A potential momentum swing for Miami, especially if Bam or Goran can implement themselves back into the lineup whatsoever. Them getting this win can definitely help them if they can come back in the series. That can definitely help them as far as momentum goes. So this could be a switch in momentum, for the entire series. So don't underplay that factor, especially with the injuries of Bam and Goran. Maybe we see them coming back, but again, that is the underlying factor here for the Miami Heat. They are still missing Goran Dragic, Bam Adebayo, which in this year's postseason, Goran averaging 20 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and then Bam Adebayo 17 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists. For him consistently doing it on both ends of the court as well. I think he's second team all defense. So yes, Bam does it on both ends of the court there, and then Goran, again, 20-point-a-night guy, runs the offense a whole lot, has the ball in his hands a whole lot of the time. Is capable of making clutch, big shots late in the ball game as well. 3-pointers in the pick and roll, you name it, he does it. So the Miami Heat are still missing both Goran and Bam. That is the underlying factor for the Heat, why they are not necessarily playing at their full potential here. But the Lakers also, another factor, the Lakers shot very inconsistently. And in specific, Danny Green and Caldwell Pope. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, in the first couple of games, we saw them knocking down their shots. They combined for 25 points and 5-6 3-pointers in the first or second game. I can't remember what game it was. I think it was the second game of the series. Either way, we saw them knocking down their shots in the first couple of games. In the beginning of the series, they struggle in Game 3. Anthony Davis struggles in Game 3, and the Lakers ultimately trail for the entire game, come up short and lose by 11 points to the undermanned, the hurt Miami Heat. LeBron had a chance to clinch the series. Okay, so if he wins this game, Game 3, if LeBron puts the Lakers on his back, which again he almost did, not quite though, he did not do it, but he had a chance here to clinch the series, go up 3-0, go up 3-0. He had a chance to do that, and he had a chance to basically seal his finals MVP. Anthony Davis, so far, like I said, in the first two games, could have been the highlight of the Lakers, the reason they win. And then in Game 3, he struggles, and it's a close game. If LeBron plays very well and they win in Game 3, despite Anthony Davis struggling the entire time, I think LeBron propels himself over Anthony Davis, despite the two dominant performances he had in games 1 and 2. If he wins Game 3, this with him struggling and with a dominant performance, I do think LeBron and his finals MVP chances raise dramatically, and the Lakers need Anthony Davis. Overall, I think now we know the Lakers need Anthony Davis to be dominant, and this is helping his case for finals MVP. LeBron plays very well, but they still can't get it done because he struggles ultimately, and he is in foul trouble. So he is a very important piece, if not maybe, I don't want to say the most important piece because we know the factor of LeBron James, but if he struggles, we know how hard it is for them to win a game, just as if LeBron struggles, how hard it is for them to win a game. So this is helping. I do think this is helping Anthony Davis's chances of winning the Finals MVP. He struggles and they lose. He plays well and they win. So that is helping his chance, somewhat hurting LeBron's chances. The Heat are missing again two big pieces in Dragic and Bam, two very big pieces in Dragic and Bam. So that is the underlying factor for them. But is this now, with the Heat missing the two big factors, with him facing this team in general, would you guys rate this Miami Heat team being LeBron's easiest finals opponent, his easiest, appearance, when regarding all of his other appearances? Miami is a very good group of players, okay, and they are not made or broken necessarily by one or two players, I think, in contrast to a team, like I've been saying, like the Milwaukee Bucks, who go by the will of Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though they did win a playoff game without him when he went down. Either way, that team pretty much, they win when Antetokounmpo wins. Okay, when he plays well, they win. The Heat aren't necessarily a team like that. They are a team, a group of good players who rely on a whole bunch of guys, not necessarily just one player. Again, like a team like Milwaukee or the Lakers who rely on Anthony Davis and just LeBron instead of 4 or 5 guys, in comparison. So the Heat, a group of very good players, not made or broken by just one player or just one injury, but a couple of big pieces with Dragic and Bam being out, 20 points from Dragic, and then 17, 11, and 5 from Bam on both ends, a two-way player Bam is. Veteran experience from Goran, so they're missing a lot from those two players. They are a big reason why they got this far, in this year's postseason. But ultimately, This is what we've seen from the Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis, ultimately. So don't be surprised or necessarily worried, Lakers and Laker fans. We see them go on a hot streak and then go on a cold one. And usually, like I said earlier, Anthony Davis, after having a bad game or a cold streak, will usually bounce back right after and have a monster, even better performance than what we're used to seeing from him. So don't worry, he's going to bounce back like he always does after a disappointing performance. He knows on the biggest stage that is not going to win an NBA Finals game. He knows that he's going to bounce back, I believe. In the Lakers shooters, though, you might want to be a little bit worried about the Lakers shooting. They're different than Anthony Davis. He will bounce back no matter what, and he will be fine in the series going forward. But as for the Lakers shooters, as far as they go, they are very streaky, very hot and cold. So will they remain cold? We saw throughout multiple spells, times throughout the season, Danny Green has not been able to buy a bucket. So especially in this year's postseason at times. So will it be another cold streak? Can they snap out of it? So watch out for that for the Lakers supporting cast. I have no doubt for Anthony Davis and LeBron, they will be just fine. But Miami remains consistent. The true tell for that culture, that team, they remain consistent. Again, they are not made or broken by just one or two players. I originally, like I've been saying, said the Lakers will win in 6 games. So I've been incorporating for Miami to win 1, maybe 2 games. So that has been incorporated. That has been thought of already. Don't worry, Lakers fans. Everyone thought, no one came into this series. At least I didn't. I don't necessarily know a whole lot of people who came into this series thinking it was going to be a 4-0 sweep. They win a game. I originally said Lakers in 6. I'm sticking to that. They won 1. I think they will perhaps win 1 more. We will see. They thrive, as we've been seeing from this Miami Heat team. They thrive while being the underdog. Game 4 is on Tuesday. We will see what happens going forward. Can the Lakers shooters, snap out of the cold streak, out of that Game 3 cold streak? Can Anthony Davis bounce back and be even better? Can he bounce back and show us similar to what we saw from him in Games 1 and 2? LeBron, can he remain consistent? And can Jimmy Butler keep the Miami Heat on his back going forward? Will them to another victory in Game 4 to tie up the series and basically change, the swing of momentum onto Miami's side? We'll see. Game 4 is on Tuesday. It's been an insane matchup, or I don't want to say an insane matchup, but I think a better matchup than a whole lot of people have been expecting. We've heard a lot of down talk on this year's finals, on this year's postseason. The ratings have been a little bit down. Don't worry, guys. Not all bad. Not everything is bad, I should say. I am a glass half filled type of person. But in my next segment, I want to discuss this year's finals, this year's title, if it does count. Stick around for that segment. But first, I want to talk to my sports bettors. Okay, listen up, guys. I want to tell you about my favorite sports book, and that is BetUS. Football, basketball, baseball, they are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. I only endorse one sports book, and you guys know that's just BetUS.com. Why, you ask? Why just BetUS? It's because BetUS is a pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the business. You guys need a sports book with integrity, longevity, and you all need to know that you're going to get paid. You need a sportsbook that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment of all kinds. They have crazy prop bets and futures. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BetUS. Go to BetUS now, fill out your information, and when you get to the how did you hear about us box, type in GSMC, and then you can get up to 150% on your first deposit. It only takes a couple of minutes, and nobody can beat that. I bet at BetUS, and so should you. Join BetUS today, and don't forget to type in GSMC to get up to 150% on your first deposit. BetUS is America's sportsbook. Go check it out. I'll see you guys there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everybody. Like I said before the break, I want to discuss this year's title, this year's postseason in whole, this year's season in whole. We all know how weird and strange and different this year has been, for the world of sports and for the world in general. We're all social distancing, wearing masks. School was shut down for a long time. We couldn't go to stores. A lot of places now you still can't do that stuff. So the world is changing. The world of sports has changed, just as much. We have the virtual fans. We have no fans. The virtual drafts. Sometimes we do have fans, but they're all socially distanced, wearing masks. We have the bubble environments, as we see for the NHL and for the NBA here. Obviously, we've had abrupted seasons for the NBA. So yes, this year for sports has been different, has been strange. Again, no fans, virtual drafts, the bubble environment, social distancing, everything that's going on. So yes, this year has been different, but I don't think just because it's been different, I don't think it should be discounted, discredited. It simply should be known as it was a different year, a strange year. A year I think everybody will remember. I want to go ahead and break it down. But as far as, the NBA bubble, let's go ahead and zone in on the NBA, since this is, again, the basketball podcast. Let's zone in on basketball here, because we have seen some strange and some, I don't want to necessarily say strange, and we've seen some pretty cool, fascinating, possibly even insane performances in the NBA bubble. In specific, the Clippers, the Clippers, they come in as NBA favorites. They then, they don't necessarily take their opponent as serious as they need to, and they blow the 3-1 lead. And then Miami, a team like Miami, which no one necessarily saw coming, being this dominant or good, they come in and they shock the world by beating the MVP in Giannis. They beat a very deep and stacked team, arguably, in the Boston Celtics. So they are not favored in almost any of their series, and they make it to the NBA Finals in dominant fashion. The Denver Nuggets come back from 3-1 on two different teams in two different series in the same postseason, something that has never been done before. And the bubble seeding games, the Suns go 8-0. TJ Warren drops 50, looks insane. Young teams, we've seen young teams, but either way. Is fair to ask. I think it is fair to ask, with all the things that we have seen, it is fair to ask, does this year even count? Should this year even count? Are we going to put one of those asterisks, the star-like things, I've explained it before. It simply means there's a lack of information there when you see an asterisk. So should there be an asterisk on this year's season? Does it even count? Should it be discredited in a way or looked down on? Does it mean as much as on any prior ones or ones going forward? This is going to be a topic going forward. I want to kind of start the domino effect. We've been talking about it, but especially with the NBA coming to a close here, the finals being almost halfway over here, when they do come to a close, I think this will be a topic going forward, a topic we hear. So look out. You did hear it here somewhat first, not necessarily first. I've been saying it for a while, though, so you did hear it here relatively early, I should say. But yes, this will be a topic of conversation going forward. But I want to be on the record of saying, I want to go on the record here at GSMC and say, I'm here to say yes, this title counts, this season counts, this year counts in the world of sports for the NFL, for the MLB, for the NHL, for the WNBA, for the NBA. This year for the NFL, this year counts. I'm here to say yes. For the NBA now, let's hone back in on the NBA. The teams still played 72 games. You can say it was an abrupted season. It came to a stop. They waited 3 months to come back to play. Yes, all of that is true. But the teams still played 72 games. Okay, they played 72 games, which if you didn't know, was only 10 games less than your original, ordinary NBA season, which is 82 games. So they only played in the coronavirus season, the 22 teams that went to the bubble, they still played 72 games, only 10 games less than what we're used to seeing. All teams as well that went into the NBA bubble, all of the NBA teams, all the teams in the league agreed to the terms of the NBA bubble. They agreed. They didn't necessarily know. The teams that didn't go there, the Warriors, they agreed. They knew they wouldn't necessarily be going. They still agreed the fact to have it, to do all this stuff. The 22 teams, I think it was, that did go to the bubble, everyone agreed to the same fact, to the same underlying terms. We're going to crown a 2020 champion. It's going to be the same as usual, different circumstances, but it's we're going to count it. It's going to be business as usual. You guys have a chance to say no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to have it this year. But they chose to do it to make a crown a champion, to crown a title victor. So that's a factor. Everyone agreed to do this and go to do it. We've seen some young, prepared, and active teams play very well in this year's bubble. I want to see that as well. We've seen a lot of young, active, and for the most part, what it seems like, prepared teams. And I do think it is showing everybody. It's showing everybody who has put the work in during the quarantine, during the 3-month hiatus. I think it was pretty much obvious who and who wasn't playing, who had the basketball in their hands, who was on the court, and who was not. I know as far as maybe a guy like Chris Middleton, Pascal Siakam. Siakam is a perfect example. He said he went months, without touching the basketball, throughout the quarantine. He had some of his worst stat lines in this year's postseason. He definitely underperformed. Was a big reason the Raptors didn't go as far as they hoped for this year with the coach of the year Nick Nurse. And a big factor of Pascal Siakam underperforming. And was that because of him not necessarily putting in the work throughout the quarantine that a lot of other players did? So I think that was a sign to tell who put work in and who did not, because it was not just the young and active teams, okay? It was not just the young and active teams. It was also veteran teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, okay? The Lakers have played very well in the postseason, gentlemen sweeping everyone up until this point in the postseason. So they have played very well, and obviously they are not a young and active team. They are obviously a veteran team with a whole lot of older players. So they're a veteran team. They have played very well in the bubble, a lot better than the younger teams have. So it's not just younger teams who have excelled and played very well. It's teams and players who have put the work in. It's a fair share of younger teams and veteran teams like the Lakers and the Miami Heat. In my opinion, this could be a little bit of a hot take here, but in my opinion, this year, what we have seen this year, it has been some of the best basketball, some of the best high-level basketball I have seen, honestly, in years. We had no idea who was going to make it out of the Eastern Conference for who knows how long. Since LeBron has been in the East, we know LeBron's coming out of the Eastern Conference, as well as in the Western Conference. We've known for years, it seems like prior years, it's the Golden State Warriors. They are coming out of the Western Conference. There's nothing anybody can do. Now, there's the Lakers, who had a really good chance. The Rockets, who everyone said had a really good chance. The Clippers, who everyone said had a really good chance. The Nuggets, at one point, who were looking very promising. So for once in a very long time, we did not know who was going to be playing on the brightest stage in the NBA Finals. We did not know the matchup we would ultimately be seeing in comparison to years prior, when we know it was simply going to be Warriors, Cavaliers, Warriors, Cavaliers, Warriors, Cavaliers, Warriors, Cavaliers. So this year, the year of change, we got a Laker-Miami Heat NBA final. And from what we've seen, again, the Lakers blowing the 3-1 lead, Denver coming back from 3-1 on two different teams in the same postseason. The Lakers playing very dominantly. The Miami Heat being surprising the MVP, beating the Boston Celtics in dominant fashion. The East being a question mark. The West being a somewhat question mark. So yes, this year, what we've seen in this year's postseason, the bubble, some of the performances that we've seen as well. Yeah, I'm very. It's easy for me to say. It's very easy for me to say. This has been some of the best and some of the best high level basketball I have seen in years. In years, everyone wants it to end. Everyone in the bubble wants this whole thing to end so they can go home. Okay, they're on a neutral playing ground. No one is home. Some people have their families now with them. Some family members, so it feels more home-like in the bubble now. But players want to go home. They are tired of being in Orlando for the most part. So everyone wants to go home. It's a neutral playing ground. It's a neutral playing field, okay? Yeah, again, it's a neutral playing field. Everyone's playing. There's no home teams, no away team. Everyone wants to go home. And the mental tough, this has been a true test for mental tough players, for mental toughness, because the mental tough players, like maybe a Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, now maybe a proven Jamal Murray type player seems to be mental tough. But they have done very well in the bubble in comparison to players who aren't as mentally tough. I'm not going to go there and say players who aren't mentally tough or anything like that. We saw the Clippers blow a 3-1 lead, blah, blah, blah. No, not going to go there, though. But anyway, we've seen mentally tough players play very well in the bubble. Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, maybe Jamal Murray has been a mental test for a lot of people. I don't really understand why this year wouldn't count or why it would be discounted in any way. No one has cheated in any way. No one has any advantages over any other team in any other way. And you don't even try to say injuries, right? Don't even try to say injuries, because that does not have an effect on this conversation either. They never have. And you know why? You know why? Because injuries have always been a factor. Always. I've also heard some slander over this year's NBA Finals. I want to discuss that. I've heard slander over this year's NBA Finals. These finals, this title, and in my opinion, is 100% just as legit as any other. Yes, LeBron, for the first time, perhaps since the Dallas Mavericks series in 2011, perhaps for the first time since then, but LeBron is favored to win the finals, favored to win this series. His team is the better team, or he's the best team. Him and Anthony Davis, all things considered, he has the best team in the NBA Finals for the first time, perhaps since the Dallas Mavericks series. So perhaps is that why we're hearing the slander and the bad mouthing of this year's finals? Because my question is, what the heck is different about this year? What is so different? Okay, again, for the first time, LeBron is favorited since the Dallas Mavericks series. Is it because of the injuries to the Miami Heat? But again, you can't discount this year's title, this year's championship by any means. You know why? Because how is this year any different? What is different this year? What is different? In 2019, Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors win the championship, win the title. Then you look at their opponent. Who were they playing? They were playing the Golden State Warriors, who were filled with injuries. Kevin Durant played one quarter. Klay Thompson tore his ACL. Multiple players on that roster. Quinn Cook was playing huge minutes. Alfonso McKinney, not players who would get any type of minutes. If you had any say in an NBA Finals. Okay, so the 2019 Finals, Kawhi wins his second championship, but Golden State is filled with injuries. Do we take anything away from Kawhi necessarily? No. We really, or the Toronto Raptors getting their first title in franchise history? No, we do not. Let's go back to 2015. Let's go back to 2015 when the Golden State Warriors won their first championship together before Kevin Durant, right? Before they cheated, right? Before they did that. Some people say that. Before that, the Cavaliers, you look at the Cavalier team LeBron had, they were filled with injuries. No Kevin Love, no Kyrie Irving for the majority of the entire of the series. So that was a huge factor of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, that Golden State group kind of breaking in, becoming the team they were. That was a huge factor. Okay, Kevin Love gets hurt, Kyrie Irving gets hurt. The Warriors get a big break. Okay, they get a big break. Let's go all the way back. If that's not good enough, let's go way back. Those are a couple of years ago. That happened a couple of years ago. That didn't necessarily. That hasn't been the case for years, right? That hasn't happened in such a long time. Let's go back to the 1998 NBA Finals. 1998, Byron Scott. It's the Los Angeles Lakers again against the Detroit Pistons. They are on the other side of the momentum switch, though, in comparison to this year. Byron Scott and Magic Johnson, they both have pulled hamstrings early in the series. The Pistons go on to win in dominant fashion, despite the Lakers being favored to win before the injuries. So Byron Scott and Magic go down with the hamstring injuries. Pistons win in dominant fashion. Do we take anything away from the bad boy Pistons? Do we take anything away from the Lakers for getting hurt? No, we do not. And some might take stuff away, but I am not. And then in comparison, another thing, some people, some might, again, I don't necessarily, but some people take things away, take anything away from Kevin Durant in the Warriors and their past championships, their back-to-back titles. Some people take things away from them. I don't necessarily. They went and won 2 championships, and we know how hard that is to do in the NBA. You need to put teams together to do stuff like that. But either way, some people, we don't necessarily though take anything away from KD and the Warriors from winning those finals. Some people might, but again, overall, I don't think we really are taking anything away. So those are multiple examples. Kevin Durant and the Warriors. The Pistons beating the Lakers without Byron Scott and Magic Johnson back in 1998. You got 2015, Golden State beats the Cavs without Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. 2019, Kawhi beats the Golden State Warriors without Kevin Durant and without Klay Thompson. So there are many different examples here, so I don't think this is anything new, and I don't think you can take anything away from this year's title winner. If the Lakers win, nothing to take away from. If the Heat come back and win, stuff to add on their side. They had injuries, they come back. On the other side, they come back to win. It definitely helps their narrative. They were hurt, they still come back to win. It can help on the other side. On the other side, though, it's the NBA Finals. It's the NBA. Injuries happen all the time. You can't discount a championship just because an injury took place. Okay, Miami is missing 2 key players in Dragic and Bam. They may return at some point in this series, but so far through 3 games, you haven't seen much of them. But again, this is nothing new. Injuries included, pandemic included, all things included. Yes, this season, this title counts. This is not going to be a discounted title or championship in any way. way in my mindset, in my opinion. We finally have a surprise in the NBA Finals. We don't have a usual Warriors-Cavaliers boring matchup. We have a surprise. We have the Lakers and the Miami Heat, two teams we didn't necessarily see getting this far. We see them both in the NBA Finals. We have a surprise, and people don't like that either. Viewer ratings are down. People are complaining on social media. What do you guys want ultimately? You don't want the favorites matching up. You don't want a surprise in the NBA Finals either. We can't win. What do you guys want? But that's what I think. I think this year's title does in fact count 100%. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section on social media. I'm going to go and take a quick break. Coming back, discussing those Los Angeles Clippers, and then my final segment, those Brooklyn Nets. Keep it here. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, guys, welcome back. Thanks for keeping it here, the GSMC basketball podcast, GSMC Podcast Network. That's it. But again, like what I said before the break, I want to talk about those Los Angeles Clippers. What do they do now? What should they do now, if you will? You know, after being the favorites all year pretty much with the roster they had after last year's free agency, after taking the Golden State Warriors 6 games in the first round of the playoffs last year, and who they added. Yes, all year, you know, they were the favorites after being the favorites all year, you know, taking the regular season not as serious as they should have, not serious enough, if you will. Then they go on, don't necessarily take the first round matchup serious enough, and it goes 6 games, longer than it should have, with a Kristaps Porzingis-less Dallas Maverick team. Then they go on to go up 3-1 on the Denver Nuggets and blow the 3-1 lead. Okay, they blow the 3-1 lead despite having huge leads in games 5, 6, and 7, or at least in games in 5 and 6. They blew a 3-1 lead. Then they go on to fire their head coach in Doc Rivers. So they're the favorites all year. They take the regular season off. They blow the 3-1 lead. They fire their coach. That is a tremendous roller coaster right there. You're going up. You know, you take the Warriors 6 games. You add Kawhi. You're taking the regular season off. You're looking forward to the postseason, and then boom, you blow the 3-1 lead. Doc Rivers, right down. You're right down the hill. You see it at Six Flags. They were going up all year. Then they go right down, blow the 3-1 lead. They fire the head coach. So now I want to discuss, what do they do now? What do they do now? Because they fired their head coach, okay? They fired their head coach in Doc Rivers, so that makes me want to think then, or go on to think, was Doc Rivers the problem in Los Angeles? Was he the scapegoat? Was he the problem, the quick fix? Is this all gonna make sense now? Why was Doc fired? And then you go to look at Doc's stats in Los Angeles, and the stats then say, yeah, Yeah, this was Doc's fault, 100%. This was Doc's fault. This team should have won. All should be put on Doc Rivers. You look at the stats. He has the worst coaching record, in Game 7s. Worst record of all the coaches in NBA history. Game 7s, he is the worst record of all of them. As far as 3-1 leads, we know how being up 3-1, you're up in a dominant fashion being up 3-1. He has now blown, after losing to Denver, he has now blown 3 different 3-1 leads. He's been up 3-1 3 different times, and he has blown that lead. He has never reached a conference finals with the Los Angeles Clippers in 7 seasons. 7 years, not one conference final. They had Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, J.J. Redick, Matt Barnes, Danny Granger, right? Remember how deep that team was? They had championship hopes out west. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, J.J. Redick, multiple different pieces to go along with them. And then they go on with the deep team they have now: Kawhi, Paul George, Lou Will, Montrez, Marcus Morris, Patrick Beverley. The deep team they have. So that does make sense. You look at all those players. You look at the 3-1 leads that he's blown. You look at the Game 7 stat line. Yeah, it makes sense. And then it especially makes sense after seeing how the Lakers dealt with Denver, beating them in just 5 games. Yeah, it definitely makes sense, especially with them beating Denver in just 5 games, doing what the Clippers should have done. But again, they blew that up. So it looks like maybe Doc was the issue if you're looking at that. But again, what do they do now? Who fills Doc's place? Will it be a quick and simple fix? Do they plug the assistant coach and Ty Lue into that starting role, the head coaching role? So is Ty Lue the guy who has won a championship? Do they put him in that role, who's pretty good at getting people to work together, older all-stars? He's worked with them together, or all them together already as well. He was able to do it in Cleveland. Jeff Van Gundy is another name getting thrown out there as well. A veteran guy. He's coached in the league before. A high IQ guy. We hear him on all the broadcasts. Mike D'Antoni, after leaving Houston, he's still a free agent out there. He loves to play small. We know how good the Clippers are at small ball. So D'Antoni, so Ty Lue, Gundy, Van Gundy, D'Antoni, all 3 of them could be very good candidates. But not just coaching wise. Do they also have options? Do they have options? It's a good question. Do they have options, and can they mix up the roster? They have no, draft picks with getting Paul George, Marcus Morris, all the stuff they went through. So no draft picks to get rid of to trade. Montrez could be a free agent. Marcus Morris could be a free agent. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard can opt out after their 3rd season if things aren't going as planned. So what's the move now? Do you move Paul George? Do you move Lou Williams? But ultimately, how much value are in those 2 players after a disappointing postseason again? So I don't necessarily know too many teams who have a player better than Paul George willing to do business for Paul George. I'm not sure too many teams are in the Paul George business right now. So are the Los Angeles Clippers stuck with the roster they have now? Will they just lose pieces and not be as good? Is it simply a coaching thing? Can they turn it around next year? Those are my questions for the Clippers going forward. And honestly, what do they do? What do they do now? Is it a simple coaching fix? Can they trade Paul George and change up this roster? Are they stuck with the players they have? What do the Clippers do next? I would love to hear your guys' opinion on this as well going forward. What do you guys think the Clippers should do next? Are they stuck? Are they in prime position to compete again next year? What do you guys think? What do the Clippers do? What should they do next going forward? I'm going to take my final break. When I come back, my final segment of the day: Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, they are in the news once again. Statements regarding their head coaching staff. I'm going to break down my comments. I'm excited to see what you guys think about that as well. All of that is coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. Like I said before the break, this is my final segment of my final episode of the week. Thanks for sticking it here, keeping it here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Make sure you check out all of the many podcasts we have to offer. This is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Let's go ahead and move on. Like I said before the break, talk about Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. They are again in the news. They made my episode earlier in the week with a big statement, and what do you know? Yet again, they are back again in my episode, back in the news with another big statement. Okay, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and mainly Kyrie though. He did a lot of the talking. But the two of them appeared on a podcast together. I don't have the name of the podcast right now. No free clout on this podcast. But anyway, they were on a podcast together, and the topic came up. The topic arose of head coaching. Coaching on the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, they're playing together. They just hired Steve Nash. The topic of coaches came up, and Kyrie was pretty quick to say and easy to say. He didn't have to, kind of get it out of him. He came out and said, I don't really think, this is a quote from Kyrie, I don't really see us as having a head coach or one head coach. End quote, or, we'll pause the quote there. I don't really see us as having a head coach. Pause quote. Wait, what? What? He said he doesn't see them as having a head coach. So that is not necessarily what you want to see or hear from one of your players. That makes me think, there's a little bit of confusion there of who's in charge, what's going on. I'm not sure. I'm not running things. I don't want to start anything here, but what? He doesn't really see them as having a head coach when they just named a head coach in Steve Nash. Don't want to. We'll keep going. We'll continue on with the quote. So he says, "I don't really see us as having a head coach. I don't really see it as having a head coach." He says, "I think it will be more of a collaborative effort." Okay, he says some days I could be the head coach. Some days Kevin could be the head coach. Some days Jacques Vaughn could be the head coach, one of the assistant coaches. He said it all depends. It's a collaborative effort on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I definitely have a few questions after hearing that, maybe a couple of concerns as well. Again, Steve Nash, what's he there to do? Is he the one saying all this? Has this been discussed prior with Steve? Did he clear this? Was this a big reason why Steve Nash got the job? Did he agree to be a collaborative effort coach, to say, I'm not going to be the guy calling all the shots. It's a collaborative. We're going to do it together as a team. I'll be the face of the head coach, but we will do it together. We will all be the coaching staff. Is that what he came in saying? Was that his pitch? Is that why he got in to this with no coaching experience? Ultimately, not quite sure. But again, those are the questions I have, a concern I have. Was this discussed prior with Steve Nash? Was this why ultimately he was selected for the position? Was this his pitch in a way to get the job? I'm not really sure, or I'm not sure how or what he means when he says the head coach, could be anyone on a given day. I don't really know what that means, because, to me, in my mind, there is there is only one head coach. There are many assistant coaches, then there are players. But as far as head coach, the head coaching position, in my mind, there has always been on a team one head coach. So as far as him saying there's going to be, anyone can be the head coach on a given day-to-day basis, that can cause a little bit of concern for me. Maybe he's meeting leaders, right? Because, in coaches and assistant coaches and players, there are leaders in all of those positions. Is Kyrie simply meaning there's going to be a different leader on a given day? Because head coach somewhat is the leader to an extent of a team. So is Kyrie kind of grouping the head coaching position to the leadership role, and he's simply saying, we're simply gonna have a different leader on a day-to-day basis. It's not gonna be just the head coach. The head coach is the leader of the team, so maybe that is what he's meaning. There's gonna be a different leader on a day-to-day basis. You could take it that way because there are leaders in all of those many positions. Maybe that's what he means, and usually the head coach is the somewhat leader to an extent of the roster. But again, overall, him hearing these comments of hearing, KD could be the coach. I could hear the coach. KD also agreeing to this, buying into this as well, double downing, on it in a way. Yes, that can cause some concerns for me. Because in a locker room on a team, you need to figure out who is in charge, who is the leader of this team. When push comes to shove at the end of ball games, when it's a 2-point game, and you have Kyrie, Irving, and Kevin Durant, two guys who are very capable. Like I said in my last podcast, Kyrie finally has a guy capable of making that shot, as he is, right? Either way, so who's going to take that final shot, right? Who's going to take that shot? And more importantly, who calls the final play? Who says who's going to take the final shot? Is Steve Nash going to say, Kyrie, you're taking it, Kevin, you're taking it? Does it simply depend who woke up that day? Or, hey, Kevin's in charge today. Kevin's in charge. Hey, Kevin, who's taking the final shot tonight? Or Kyrie? Kyrie's taking it tonight. just playing around. But still, does it simply depend on that day? Who's in charge? Who is making the final call ultimately? Who's making the final play call? Who decides on practices and such? Usually the head coach does that, but in Brooklyn with two guys like KD and Kyrie, who knows? Who knows? We will see in Brooklyn. I do see this as a potential problem starter here, but look out, I don't want to start the problem or make people look at that. Maybe he means leader. Again, there's going to be a different leader, but again, if he means what he said and there's going to be a different head coach every single day, I think that could make an issue going forward, cause an issue going forward potentially. Who's going to call the final play? Who's taking the final shot? Stuff like that. So watch out in Brooklyn. This could potentially cause some future problems. We'll see. I don't want to start that though. We will see. We'll discuss it, when next year, comes around in January, right? Who knows when next season is even going to start. And we're going to see Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Steve Nash or whoever in the coaching chair, right? But that's going to be it for the GSMC Basketball Podcast, guys. Thank you so much for your continued support. The NBA Finals are continuing on Tuesday. Game 4 is on Tuesday. We'll see if Jimmy Butler can continue to swing the momentum in him in the Miami Heat's favor, or can LeBron and the Lakers take a commanding 3-1 lead because they are ultimately favored to win this Finals, like we all know. Can the Heat get their players back and Goran and Bam? A whole lot of questions. We'll see what Game 4 has in store for us. Again, thank you for your continued support. Go check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Leave us a comment on whatever platform you're listening on. Thank you again for all the continued support. This is my last podcast of the week, but I will see you guys right back here at GSMC on Monday. I'll see you guys then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.